Hey guys, my name's Allison and I was a JET from 2018 to 2020, and today I'll be going through the JET program application for 2021 and giving you some advice on how to fill out some of it. Okay, so we're going to start from the work experiences section, since the ones prior to this are pretty self-explanatory. So at the very top it says include your most recent and or relevant. So for number 1, I would put most recent if it is a full-time job or a job where you have some sort of seniority, that type of thing. Go ahead and put that down, probably regardless of what it is. But then for number 2 and number 3, I think you should go with the most relevant approach. Like, let's say you worked at a Uniqlo 5 years ago, and it's not necessarily one of your most recent jobs, but it definitely connects to, you know, the application you're filling out. You should always try to tailor your resume to what you're applying for. So try to pick whatever your employment experiences you have that, you know, are kind of on an international relations topic, or maybe you interacted with a lot of international people, like you worked at a theme park or something like that. Or just go with, you know, your best jobs in general. If you don't have anything that you think would necessarily connect to the JET program significantly, just go with, you know, your top 3 jobs. Internships count, I believe. It's not volunteering, so it's a job. So now we're going to move on to teaching experience. The first part, if you're a teacher, it's pretty easy. But for the second part, it says other teaching experience, including volunteer work. So this could be anything from just tutoring on the trumpet in high school to, you know, tutoring math or English at the library, anything like that. Go ahead and include it. And do not list any future plans if you haven't done it up to the application. Ideally, you'll have something to put in here, just any volunteer work, reading to children, anything. Just one thing even will be better than nothing, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. A lot of people don't have any experience. So for the TEFL, all that section, a lot of people think they should get it before they apply to JET, but I would say it's not worth it, really. I don't think it'll significantly impact your application unless you really are very weak in every other area. I would only get the TESOL or something like that before coming over if you intend on teaching in a different country after JET, or moving to different English teaching in Japan after JET. But if you're just gonna go home afterwards, it's not worth the hassle, I don't think. So number 14, the proposed direction of your career. I think it can be pretty hard to fill this one out, but in general, you should put your career plan so that you're returning back home after JET. You don't want to stay in Japan at least, because the purpose of JET is not only for you to bring your culture over, but it's for you to go home and to, you know, say the good word about Japan, how great it is, get more people to want to come over, be interested, that type of thing. So they want you to go home. They don't want you to stay in Japan. Even if that's actually what you'll end up doing, I wouldn't write it down, because these are just future plans. They're tentative. They won't check or anything in a few years. So at least just make sure you go home and try to connect things that you'll think you'll learn on the JET program to whatever career you're interested in. I think engineering, things like that, are a bit harder to connect, but I know a lot of people online have advice for that. It's not really my specialty. But for things like business and things like that, I think it's super easy to connect, because you can just add the word international in front of it, and all of a sudden you have all these great, you know, attributes of the JET program you can pull from, like flexibility, international cultures, etc. It's pretty easy if you can do that type of thing. But keep it short, only 560 characters or less. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to Japan-related studies. So this is where you list your formal study, but self-study is also okay. So at minimum, before you go to Japan, I think you should at least learn hiragana and basic greetings. It'll just make your life so much easier starting out. So if by the interview, you know, in February or so, if you can learn the greetings, how to introduce yourself, then put something down. If you can't do that much, then I wouldn't do it. But if you could just put a little bit, it really shows you're interested in it and that you're ready to grow more. So you can put down some self-study, or of course if you put college courses, that's the best. And then down here in Japanese history culture, Do not put like self-study of anime or something like that here. Only put real classes. In this whole application, if you're going to mention an anime anywhere, I would only do it here, and only if you took a specific class titled Japanese Animation History or something like that. Otherwise, I think we should lay off the anime for now. But if you took any Asian studies class in general, I think that's also applicable. Anything that mentioned Japan in the class is fine. So like I mentioned earlier, ideally you will be at an introductory level when you come to Japan. Learning hiragana and katakana will just make everything so much easier once you're here. And just introducing your name, your hobbies, you should definitely strive to be able to do that in time. I would say the kanji don't matter as much, especially in the interview. At least in my case, it was only a speaking test, so reading isn't as important. But of course, if you can learn a few, definitely do it. And then the other levels, I think you'll know about what you are. There is a huge gap in the JET program proficiency selection between intermediate and semi-advanced. You jump from about 300 kanji to 1,000, when really I think there should be one more level in between here. But I think that's because if you're semi-advanced or advanced, you'll probably be applying to be a CIR. And anything below that is an ALT basically. But there will be a speaking test or some sort of test at the interview, so don't lie. You'll get exposed. Okay, so moving on to number 17, we have international intercultural experience at home or abroad. Don't put 3 trips you took to Europe. If you have a Japanese culture festival in town you volunteered at or something like that, that's going to be so much stronger than you doing the same thing every time. Each of your experiences should be different types of experiences. They don't need to see 3 different trips to Japan even, because it's the same thing. You're saying the same thing through it. Ideally, even just, you know, being a tour guide to exchange students around campus is better, I think, than 3 trips to Canada or whatever. And really, I would be kind of liberal with the application of this. Anything where you interacted significantly with that gave you intercultural experience, I think is valid. You know, a festival, an exchange fair, any language exchanges, anything that you have in your city. Not everyone has the privilege to go abroad in college. So even if they're all at home, I think that's completely okay. It just matters that you're trying to do, you know, you're trying to expose yourself to whatever you can get where you are. So for the honors and awards section, you can only list 2 or 3. In the American one, I think all the applications around the world are a little bit different in terms of how many things you can fill out. But for this one, it's just 2 or 3. And again, stick with relevant. If any of these are like a Rotary scholarship or something like that, include it. Anything related to Asia, intercultural, put that first. If you don't have any of that type of thing, then default to your best one. So down here in extracurricular, I know you want to put anime. I know it, but please don't. Especially when you only have 2 or 3 applicable experience options. Anime is not going to be one that you want to put down. For extracurricular, put something like International Relations Club, or anything, even if it's not Japan related. I think this section is more, they just want to know that you're a human being with varied interests. Like a lot of people who are on the soccer team in college, they'll come to Japan and they'll get involved in community soccer, that type of thing. They just want to see what the potential is and that you'll, you know, you have a personality. So for the marital status section, basically, you're either married or you're not married, honestly. I know it says engaged, but you should be married prior if you can, because your significant other will not be able to get a visa unless you're from a country with a working holiday visa. But even then, your BOE might be against you living with someone you're not married to. That's just how it is. It might not allow you to. And then it asks if you're accompanied by family members. I think a lot of people are worried that if they are, they'll be disqualified, but that's not the case at all, I don't think. There's plenty of BOEs who prefer families because the more people you bring, the more exposure the town gets to foreigners. So that's a win, all for the price of one jet. But other BOEs, like my BOE, they only requested single people just because the housing was studio apartments, so a family couldn't come. But otherwise, I wouldn't worry too much. And in general, the percentage of families who come over compared to single people is significantly lower. So it asks if you have a full or complete driver's license. I wouldn't lie about this, even though a lot of people, they want to lie because they don't want to drive. But if you are in a position where you have to drive, I guarantee you it will be so much easier than your home country. Because if you're in a situation where you need a car, it's because there's like no people and everything's spread out. But that means there's no traffic, the roads are like 2 lanes. It will be very easy to drive. So I highly recommend driving in Japan in general. It's just very easy. Especially because you'll probably be in a K car, which are very small compared to the normal size cars. If you're gonna learn how to drive really anywhere, I think Japan's a great place for it, especially in the countryside. City's a bit harder, but you won't need to drive in the city if you get placed there. So then moving down to placement requests, do they care? Do they not give a crap? I'd say they don't care unless you have specific circumstances, which I'll get into. But for the American one, at least, you can only choose one of the options, no preference, island, rural, or urban. In my opinion, you should only be choosing rural, island, or no preference. If you're choosing urban, I just think there's so many other programs out there for you that will actually get you in a city, guaranteed, basically. Like Interac, the NEA Kaiwa company. I don't think you should go to JET just to be placed in a rural place for 1 year and hate it and then move to Tokyo. It's just not the right program for you. So choose one of those. I put rural and I got rural. And then here it asks you to choose blocks and prefectures. I don't know if this matters at all, honestly. And out of the blocks I picked, I didn't get it. But it asks for your reason, but honestly, if you put something like, oh, Mount Fuji's pretty, I want to live in Yamanashi, you won't get it. If you have a strong reason, definitely put it down, and I think they will consider it if it's, you know, kind of has some depth to it. But then down here it has a specific request for placement, and it listens medical reasons, family members. These are definitely 2 situations where they do actually, I think, take it into consideration. If you say due to medical reasons you'd like to be near a hospital, I think they will actually listen to that and take that into consideration, and maybe you'll get a less rural option. And for family members, I do know 1 or 2 people who are like part Japanese, and they do have like grandparents that live in a specific prefecture, so they requested it and they got it. So it's not like they just completely ignore this section. It just depends on if you have a good reason or not. So for the self-reported medical conditions, there are some that I think it won't make it impossible for you to go to Japan, but your experience will be very difficult. For example, if you have difficulty navigating the stairs, Japan is a very not disability friendly country, especially schools. I've had kids who broke their legs and the homeroom teacher would carry them on their backs up 4 flights of stairs because there's no elevator, and they won't build them. I don't know. Some schools of course do have elevators, but it's not guaranteed. But things like allergies and dietary restrictions, don't worry, that's not gonna affect at all. Just things like that. And then it's kind of hard to talk about, but mental illness, I think you should be very serious in considering if moving abroad in general is the right decision for you, especially to a rural area. It can be very isolating and very hard. And a lot of people who move here do get depressed. They get very lonely. They end up hating it and they move back home very quickly. And I think if you don't think that the rural area is right for you, that it'll be too lonely, then move to the city in a different program. it's not worth the risk of your mental health. So then for statement of purpose, I'm gonna make a whole different video on it because I think it's the most important part of your application and I can't cover it in this. And then really quick on references, make sure, don't just ask two people randomly to write you a general letter of recommendation. Make sure they know what you're applying for, why you're applying for it, you know, list all of your experiences. You don't just want to hand them just a request. You want ideally your resume and a list of reasons of why you're going and how you prepared for it that specifically relate to this person if possible. Or they won't write you a good letter. You know, they can't write you a good letter based off of no information. So lastly, really quick, just on demographic information, you don't have to self-report this if you don't want, but in general, I don't think it does not affect you at all if you'll get accepted or not. They do not take race into account. There's plenty of different races and ethnicities teaching English here in Japan, so do not worry. Alright, so that's going to be the end of this video covering the application. And I hope you'll click the like button and subscribe so when I upload the next video on the statement of purpose and eventually interview questions, you can watch those too and just make the best application you can. All right, thanks guys.